Good afternoon and happy Wednesday. Right, I'm just going to share this to my group. Give me just a second. Perfect. Okay, fantastic. So, in today's session, I want to talk about something which comes up in all of my work. Comes up in 90% of my client work, which is and is one of the main pillars of the work that I do, and is the theme that runs through all of my Thrive program and my one-to-one work. And that is the importance of understanding our childhood and understanding how that informs who we are and how we are as adults. And I absolutely love talking about this stuff because it makes so much sense, and it's just something that I love from a professional point of view. I mean, my entire career has been built around this, both as a social worker and as a counsellor and as a coach. And it's something which I think still doesn't really get fully understood, and in a large part still isn't really talked about. It's not talked about because it's not understood, or vice versa. I'm not really sure, but it is absolutely essential to understand it. And I put in the blurb that it's about not being. To be honest with you, I saw that post, that picture, on another group post this morning, and I thought, wow, that sums up all of the work that I do. But actually, as I've been sitting here thinking about it and mulling it over this morning, it's not just about what as mothers we pass on to our children. But it's also about how our own childhood experiences impact absolutely every single aspect of our life. And I've got to be honest, I've always been, I've up to this point, or up until very recently, I've built a career on working with mums, and kind of helping them to break negative family cycles. But actually, I realise now that so much of the work that I do helps women, regardless of mums or not mums, in every single aspect of their life. I've helped so many mums with confidence in their careers, confidence in their body, confidence in their relationships, the whole lot. So that's it. That is what I want to talk about today. And just to make it clear that this applies to men as well, but my client base is women mostly, 90% women. And so this isn't about being a mum. This is about having childhood wounds that we need to heal from. And in my experience, everybody has childhood wounds that they need to heal from in varying degree. Okay, so this is not about childhood trauma. It might be about childhood trauma. It might be about an abusive childhood, but a lot of the time it's not. A lot of the time it is about an emotional disconnect for whatever reason, or an experience that was felt, an experience that was had that changed the direction, even at a tiny percent, changed the direction, your trajectory, and all of your life decisions, or so many of your life decisions, have been built on that experience. And that is what I've just find so fascinating, and that is what I love so much, because every single decision that we make is based on a previous experience. And I challenge you to be able to think back to all of your big decisions and see how far you can trace it back, and where you think that it might have started. I mean, it's a pretty difficult exercise to do on your own, but not impossible. And it's really fascinating, because this is about the choices that we make based on the experiences that we have been given, either given by our parents or given by our own life choices, right? So that's the first thing that I want to say. The first thing that I want to say is that childhood wounds are not necessarily trauma-based, in the overwhelming majority, not trauma-based at all, and that everybody has them. So the work that we do, the work that I do, the work that we do when we do these sessions, if we're not talking about blame. There's no. Sometimes it is about blame, right? So if we're thinking about, I mean, I've got a handful of clients in my mind now where I think abusive childhoods, you can apportion blame to a parent, right? But a lot of it, this isn't a blame game. I don't come at this from a point of view of apportioning blame to anybody, because what I've learned is that as adults, and I'm kind of pointing to myself because this is my generation, because the clients that I work with, we all tend to be at a similar life stage, all in our 40s, all parents. So our generation. Were parented by parents who likely had either a similar experience, not the same experience, but a similar experience. And it's likely that their parents had the same experience, okay? So when I talk about, I just talk about wounds and I talk about dysfunction, because I think wounds and dysfunction kind of covers everything from my point of view. Now, I'm going to drop this in just so that this kind of makes sense as I'm talking. Before I came into counselling and coaching, or before I came into therapeutic coaching, which is what I do now, I had 20 years experience as a social worker, as both a qualified and an unqualified social worker. So I've got my entire professional development and my personal development. I grew up working for local authority children and families team from the age of 20 to 40, pretty much, right? So I've seen these patterns. I've seen these generational cycles play out over and over again. Now, like I said, some of that is trauma-based, some of it is not, but the patterns recreate anyway. Then when I started doing counselling, I started seeing exactly the same patterns coming up time and time again. And now I do therapeutic coaching, and I see no different. So I talk about wounds and I talk about dysfunction because in my slice of the cake, and like I'm very happy to say that this is only my experience in terms of the clients that I work with and the people in my network, right? I'm not blanketing everybody with this, but in the slice of the cake that I work with and that I live in, everybody has childhood wounds for varying reasons. Everybody has had some sort of dysfunction in their childhood that they need to heal. Okay. And we don't talk about blame because it's not about blame. So, in fact, that brings me on actually, because so somebody got in touch with me when they saw me posting that this morning, and they said, "What if you don't know that you need to heal?" So the post that I wrote this morning was the picture that I stole from another group this morning said, "Heal yourself so your children don't have to heal from you." Words to that effect, right? Which I loved, because that's the work that I do basically. So she messaged me and she said, "What if you don't know that you need to heal?" Which is an excellent question. And the answer is, I think most people, not all people, but most people don't realise that they need to heal until they've had their own children. A lot of people don't realise how triggered they get until they have their own children. So I did a post a while ago on healing your inner child, and a lot of that post was kind of thinking around. I mean, obviously, look, childhood wounds, inner child, confidence mindset, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. I mean, it's an absolute minefield. There is so much that you know, books, libraries have been written on this stuff, and every single one of those books is different. So there's way too much. I can only kind of do the slither that makes most sense to me. But you know, when we're thinking, oh, I'm going to go off on tangent. Let me try and stick to the subject before I start going off. Hang on a minute. When we think about, if we don't know that we need to heal until we have our own children, I would say, I don't want to put a percentage on it. I would say that is a huge portion of parents. We'll include dads in that as well, right? You don't realise these things until you become a parent yourself, because when you become a parent yourself, all these kinds of emotions come up for you. Like, your life completely bloody changes. It completely changes in a wonderful way when you become a parent. And then all of these things then start either reliving, or they start making sense to you in a different way, or you acknowledge them but you accept them differently. You start making peace with stuff, you start getting angry with stuff. All of this happens along your parenting journey. And so some people will know that they have to heal before they have their own children. Some people may choose, a lady I was speaking to a couple of weeks ago, some will choose not to have children because they don't want to pass on their baggage, if you like, to their children. But I think a lot of people realise this stuff when they've had their own children, or a huge part of it actually is when they are in a relationship, and in fact they don't always realise that, because this is a lot of the work that I do with them, is recognising how you are in a relationship, in a long-term relationship, and realising where those patterns of behaviour come up. So my Thrive programme, so I have two ways of working to me. This isn't a sell, this is just factual input. 1-to-1 for 12 sessions over 4 months, or a do-it-yourself course with a group coaching element to it. So, and both of those have got a self-study element to them. So I've got 9 modules, which if you work with me 1-to-1, you get, or you don't have to work with me 1-to-1, and you can just buy the 9 modules and do the group coaching in my private Facebook group, Thrive, right? Has all these themes running through it, because whether I'm working with a couple, whether I'm working with an individual around their own issues, or their dynamic with their partner, or their dynamic with their children, all the same issues all come up all the time. And we don't often realise that until we are then recreating those stories in our own way. And that's why it's so important to be aware and to be accountable, because you can be replaying your own childhood issues, your own childhood dysfunction, let's get clear on this, without realising that you're doing it, because you're doing it in your own way, and you're doing it in a way that is different to how your parents did it. And so because it's different to how your parents did it, you think that you're not doing it. You think you're not repeating the same narrative, the same cycle. But you are. You are, because it's very difficult to not do that unless you are really aware of what you're doing, and unless you're really aware of the dysfunction that happened in your childhood. And like I said, we're not talking about heavy duty trauma. We're talking about family dysfunction, which is 90% of every family in the world, as far as I'm concerned. Prove me, like, how I'm happy for you to prove me wrong on that, but I don't really think that's the case. So you recreate it in your own way. Then when you get into a long-term relationship, you're with your partner, you start having your own children, all this shit just comes back up to the surface again, and you now need to work out what's yours, what's theirs. So if you've got a partner, they're doing exactly the same as well, and then what belongs to either your parents or your ancestral line. And so to go back to the question that I was asked, sorry, I'm diving all over the place because there's just so much to talk about and I love it so much. What if you don't know that you need to heal? You probably don't know that you need to heal until you are in it, and not like too late, because it's never, ever, ever too late to do the work and heal. But you often don't know until you do have your own children. So to the lady that asked me that question, I hope that answers your question. And B, I know you really well. And you're a fabulous mother. Okay? So I know that you're watching this on replay later. So hear me now. You are a fabulous mother. So don't think that your experience of trauma, which for you it was, has of course affected you, but it hasn't stopped you being a brilliant mum. Okay, that's to you. You know who you are. Okay, so what I touched on there is I touched on accountability and awareness. And accountability and awareness is really important, but we don't always have accountability and awareness. We don't always see these patterns. We don't always recognise our dysfunction for what it is, because sometimes our dysfunction can be born out of neglect or emotional abuse. It doesn't always have to be like the thin end of the wedge. Sometimes it can just be, like let's be really honest about this. Sometimes parents cause wounds that, or sometimes our family upbringing is dysfunctional, and there's lots of different reasons why that might be. Lots and lots of different reasons. Like I said, 20 years experience as a social worker, there's pretty much nothing that I haven't seen. There's pretty much nothing that I haven't been able to observe. And now, as I've got older and I can intellectualize it, if you like, I've got like my counselling experience as well, I can see it differently. And parents don't always mean to harm their children. Parents don't always intend to have a dysfunctional family for their children to grow in. But there are often mental health problems. So for a start, they've probably got their own childhood wounds, right? Because in my experience, if your parents were dysfunctional, the chances are their parents were dysfunctional too. And you can probably trace that back and back. So you've got parental mental ill health. You've got drug and alcohol issues. You've got depression, which I know is mental ill health, but I mean depression, anxiety. There could be relationship difficulties. There could be all sorts going on, right? So not all family dysfunction is done on purpose, is what I'm saying. And I've got a couple of clients that are always at the forefront of my mind whenever I do talks like this, so one in particular was loved by her parents, was absolutely loved by her parents, but she was a sensitive child. and I mean that in a nice way. That's not critical at all. Some of our children are very sensitive, and some are a bit more robust, right? I have a sensitive child myself, so I understand that there are some children that we need to manage more gently. And with her sensitive nature, things happened. Her own parents' relationship was not great, by the way, and things happened that she absolutely. So, I don't want to do her a disservice, but I also don't want to turn this into a case study, because this isn't a case study about her. So there was something. So her parents had a dysfunctional relationship. She was a sensitive child. Some stuff happened that was not good, and that affected her. So stuff happened not good, wounded her. And then other stuff that wouldn't have affected another child in the same way that it affected her, it really affected her. So some of it was big and some of it was not big. But to her, it was all big. It was all big to her. And so, but she was loved. Like whatever BS her parents were carrying around in their relationship, as far as they were concerned, she was loved. And she knew that she was loved. Like she knew that her parents loved her. And yet, she can describe a very dysfunctional, painful childhood. And that's how it goes. So that's why I said right at the top, we're not always talking about trauma. We're not always talking about big stuff. Sometimes we are just talking about dysfunction and wounding, and how we are aware of that. And so when I talk about accountability and I talk about awareness, you know, it sounds a bit silly to say it, but you have to be aware in order to be aware. You can't be aware if you're not aware, and usually that awareness will come up in a relationship. So whether that's a relationship with your partner or whether that's a relationship with your child as you become a parent, that is usually when you become aware. So, and then once you're aware and once you are accountable for your behaviour, then we get to do the work. We can't do the work unless you're there already. But once you are there and you're like, wow, I recognise now that this needs to change, that's when people come to me, and that's when we start doing the work together, when we know that this is the situation and this is how it needs to change. Otherwise it's very difficult. We don't know what we don't know. A bit like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Like, you only know the answers if you know the answers. If you don't know the answers, you don't. It's as simple as that. So let's have a think now about the other areas of our life. I've talked about kind of like parenting and childhood. Let's have a think about how the other areas of our life are also impacted by our childhood, because this is big stuff, right? Our childhood affects every single part of who we are as adults, male or female, parent or not. And that's because our confidence and our mindset is so hugely weighted in our childhood experience. Who we are, I have to talk about confidence, your self-worth, how much you consider yourself to be worthy of love, the value that you put on yourself, how good you feel about yourself in terms of your self-esteem, how lovable you think you are, how good you think you are at life in general, all comes back to your childhood, largely comes back to your childhood, mostly comes back down to your childhood. So depending on how you think and feel about yourself is going to determine the kind of relationships you have, whether you want to be treated well in a relationship, whether you know you deserve to be treated well in a relationship, whether you are happy to settle because this is as good as it's ever going to get and I should be grateful for what I've got. Self-worth right there. It's going to determine how you feel about yourself in terms of your career, whether you're good enough to do the job that you've got, whether you are good enough to put yourself forward for promotion, whether you are settling in a job that you didn't even anticipate that you were going to have, but you've got it and actually there's no point in trying to do anything else because I'm back again. Whether or not you are only good enough for the job that you've got. And so why would you put yourself forward to do something, to do your dream career or to do something that you feel really passionately about? Maybe it's about how much you think you are worth financially and whether or not you think you deserve more financially, whether or not you are an overeater, whether you have a good body, whether you feel confident about your looks, whether you feel confident wearing certain clothes or confident enough to join a gym and expose yourself with all those other fit, skinny people in the gym. Like so many aspects of your life and how you feel about yourself and how you, like your, when we think about your mindset in terms of do you like to stay in your comfort zone? Does every time you trip and fall in life, does that tell you that you should never have tried to run in the first place? Or do you use that stumble and fall as an opportunity to learn what you did wrong and what you need to tweak in order to do better the next time? I'm aware I'm going off tangent by talking about confidence and mindset and talking about childhood wounds and kind of dysfunction, but it's all part of the same thing. Because here's why. Because how we feel about ourselves as adults is ultimately what we pass on to our children. I've just been working with a couple just now, actually, just talking about role models and how we are role models to our children. I preach this stuff all the bloody time. Like this is my bread and butter. Because if you don't realise that how you show up is what you are teaching your children about how they are going to be showing up in their life, then you're missing something huge. You're missing something huge. We don't get to teach our children with words and then do something differently ourselves. We don't get to. This is an example. This is an example that is very poignant to me because I'm a mother of two daughters, right? And so I want them to grow up confident, happy, confident, thriving, full of the joys of life, right? So every time I stand in front of that mirror and I call myself a fat bitch, what am I teaching my children? How can I look at my children and say, you are absolutely glorious, every single inch of your body is divine, and then stand and look at myself in the mirror and tell myself I've got a fat ass? It doesn't make sense. Now, I might think that I do have a fat ass, but I cannot embody that, right? We cannot do one thing and say another. In any aspect of our life, we cannot do something different, say something different to what we do. Our children are always learning from us. So we have a choice. Comes back round. It's coming back round. It's making sense in my head. I'm coming back round now. I'm going to wrap up in a minute. We have to be aware. We have to be accountable. And we have to be good role models. And so at whatever point in your journey you need to heal, prioritize doing that. Prioritize healing, because you're not doing it for you. Well, you're not only doing it for you. You are doing it for you, but you're doing it for them too. But when you do it for you, even if you're only doing it for you, you are doing it for them too. So if your healing helps you to become more confident, to be happier, to have a better relationship with your partner, to embody well-being, health and exercise and well-being, to know that you can go for that promotion or that you can start that career change, because that's makes the fire in your heart burn, then do that. Do those things for you. Because when your children watch you come alive and be the best version of yourself and be happy and be fulfilled and have meaningful relationships, not just with your partner, but with everyone around you, and have a job that you actually love to do, and look after your body because you love your body, and just do the things that make you happy, you're teaching them that they don't have to settle. They don't have to settle for second best. We don't get to tell our children that they've got to be fabulous and they've got to be confident and they've got to try hard and they've got to do all of this stuff when we're just living a boring humdrum life. It doesn't make any sense. If you want your children to have a life that is full of passion, then you have to have a life that's full of passion too. You don't get to wake up every day and think, bollocks, it's Monday, I've got to go to work, and it's Tuesday, I've got to go to work, and oh, I hate my job so much, and then tell them to follow their dreams. It doesn't make any sense. I've gone off tangent. I know I've gone off tangent. I know I can't help it. I just love talking about this stuff so much. But what it all comes back down to is being the best version of yourself. So whatever healing you need to do it, because you deserve it. Everybody deserves it. Everybody has dysfunction. Everybody has wounds, and everybody should prioritize healing over and above anything else. If not just for you, then for your children, for your partner, for all of your relationships. Wow, that was a... I feel like I need to go and lie down. All right, I hope that was helpful. I loved that so much. I haven't seen any comments, so I'm presuming there aren't any comments. If there are, I'm so sorry. I can't see them. If I come off now and I see lots of comments, I promise I will write back. All right, but yeah, there we go. All right, guys, have a lovely rest of week. Enjoy, and I will catch up with you. Might come in next week. I'm going to be on Hollybobs next week, but I might come in next week and do a quick live anyway and show off the lovely Spanish sunshine. Okay, take care. Bye bye.